Hi, welcome to Off the Record with LegALLY at Law. As you know, last week we had the pleasure of having Marge C on our episode talking about what she does in her spare time. Not that she has much of it, but she has dedicated sort of her life at this point to assisting inmates and talking to them. And she also holds a live show with them on TikTok. And we actually have the pleasure today of having her co-host on my show with Marge. As you can see, she's here to my left, and this co-host is Keith Erickson, and he's going to be on the phone. But I want you guys to know that because he is in prison, he can only have 15 minutes of a free phone call. So every 15 minutes you will hear on the phone, he has to hang up and call back. The phone calls are recorded. Everything that me and Marge will say to him, and Marge does every week and almost every day, is recorded. And that's for the law. When you are in prison, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy because you are in prison. So because of that, everything will be recorded. Obviously, this is being recorded because we're on a podcast, but just so you guys know, you will hear the inmate recording, and that's what that is. So Marge, why don't you tell everyone, just in case they didn't watch the last episode, where to find you on social media, and a little bit about just a Cliff Note version about Keith. So, because we're going to hear it from him.
Yes. Hi, I'm Marge C. I'm on TikTok, so you can find me at Marge C625. I also have Charged with Change on TikTok. I do stream on there also. That's where I do my prison calls. Keith is my co-host. He does arrange all the shows for me on Friday nights. We do these calls on Friday evenings at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So he does arrange to have a show for me every week. He finds the inmate he wants us to interview. They tell us a little bit about their story, what happened to them while they're in prison. We do that. We do other shows. We talk about NA, AA. Tonight we're doing a show about crimes and gangs in prison, about the reform in reference to that. He also heads the dog program, service dogs in prison. So Keith is one of the liaisons for Wiley's Wishes.
Thanks, Marge. And so tonight we're going to talk about Keith, and I'm going to ask him to, of course, first tell us, he should be calling here any second, to tell us about who he is as a person and sort of how he got hooked up in the unfortunate prison system, his story. And then obviously he does a lot of amazing things. Many of the things that we mentioned in the last podcast episode are things that he's done, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So he'll tell us about that. And hopefully, here he is.
Here he is.
Hi, Keith.
I have to accept it real quick.
Sorry.
We got to listen to this, unfortunately.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. You have a prepaid call. You will not be charged for this call. To accept this call,
It works sometimes. There we go.
Robert Telling.
Hi, Keith.
Hello.
There you go, Keith.
Good. It's Allie. You're live currently on my podcast with Marge and me and my producer. He you can't see him or hear him, but he is here. How are you?
Okay. Good. I'm fine. How are you today? Tonight.
Good. Thanks for coming on the show. Me and Marge wanted to have you on because Marge considers you family. And obviously, we talked a lot about you in our last episode, and you're her co-host. So I thought you would be a great first person to have on the show for the podcast, for being our first person in prison. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, I met Marge earlier this year, and it just seems like, I don't know, however the stars aligned, it seems like since we were introduced, we spent a lot of time really getting to know each other and doing good things for each other and with each other. So I'm grateful to be on your live tonight.
Yeah, so I wanted to first start off, and again, share as much as you feel willing and are comfortable sharing, especially if you're in active litigation. I don't want you to share anything that's going to impact your case. So I wanted you to first start off by telling, if as much as you can, about your story, what landed you in the prison system and what your sentence is. And then we could talk about all the wonderful things that you have done and who you are today. And I would assume that's a little bit different than who you were a few years ago when you first entered the prison. Not a few years ago, but same difference.
Yes, without a doubt. Well, first and foremost, I'm 54 years old. I've been incarcerated for the past 32 years. And in 1994, both my biological mother and I were arrested, charged, and convicted for first-degree murder of the killing of her then-living boyfriend. However, my story, it starts way before then. Like, I've been a product of the system, or a byproduct of the system since I was a juvenile. I had a very rough upbringing. My biological parents divorced when I was 3 years old. My mother remarried my stepfather when I was about 5 or 6. Right away, it was dysfunctional. This man was, he not only abusive towards my mother, but he was abusive towards myself and my brother as well. He became an alcoholic and a heroin addict early on. First it started off with him just beating on my mother, and then over the course of a couple years, everything that was originally behind closed door, it started coming out of the bedroom, and it started affecting me and my brother. I seemed to be the one that got most of the beatings. After a couple years of the beatings, it took me a lot of years to really talk about it, well into my 40s, but he had also sexually molested me as well. At the age of 11, he almost took my life. It was the day after my 11th birthday, and he woke up felt sick one morning, not having his neck stick to heroin, and he came into the living room and asked my brother and I, who ate the last piece of my birthday cake from the night before, and I fessed up to it, and right away he dragged me into my bedroom and started beating me. If it wasn't for the neighbors breaking in the door and coming in and pulling them off me, he probably would have killed me that morning. He collapsed both my lungs, he broke my ribs, broke my arm, fractured my nose. And as soon as they broke in the door, when they ran in there, he was standing on the edge of the bed holding me up by my neck off the floor. So right away, they life-flighted me to a doctor's medical center in the town that I live in. And while I was in the hospital, my mother had helped bail this man out of jail with his family and actually brought him to the hospital so he could say sorry to me and apologize for what he did to me. And, needless to say, he was rearrested again. And CPS said, they took me away from my mother for that. And they told her, until you divorce this man and find a safe environment, you're not going to get your son back. My brother went and lived with his our biological father. I stayed in the foster care system. Eventually, my stepfather did go to prison for what he did to me, but things with my mother were never the same. So I went into the foster care system. I spent, the next few years in and out of placement homes, boys ranches, juvenile hall, runaway on the streets, committing petty crimes, like breaking and entering to have somewhere to sleep in at night, breaking into cars. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. By the age of 15, I'd already been in and out of juvenile hall 21 or 22 times, and I just wouldn't stay nowhere. I kept running away everywhere they placed me. I had no trust in especially in adults. I had no trust in the system that they were going to protect me. I felt like the people that brought me into this world couldn't even love and protect me the way they were supposed to. So right away, I had a jaded sense of even trusting in anybody. I remember going in front of the judge in juvenile court at the age of 16, and he specifically told me, Keith, I have to sentence you somewhere where you can't run. I'm going to send you to California Youth Authority, which is, at the time, they used to house juveniles all the way up till you could be kept there all the way till you're up to 25 years of age. So I got there were kids 10, 11, 12 years old on some lodges, and on other lodges there was 12, 13, 14-year-olds housed with 21, 23,
which is not good.
25-year-old men. Yeah, and it's not good, and it exposed me to a lot of, I had already been exposed to a lot of trauma, sexually, physically. I was already in that mode of fight or flight. I knew what victimization was. I knew what, I knew what it would look like if I showed any kind of weakness. I knew that I would get preyed on, and I've seen things in there that that I never wanted to see. And I also did things that I'm not proud of, but I also, as a means of survival in there, I felt like either I participated or joined in, or I was going to become victimized as well. And that was a lot, and I didn't realize how much it would affect me until the latter years. I had gotten out of the youth authority the first time at age, I believe, 16 and a half, almost 17. And I came back out into the community, and I even attempted to, be reunited with my biological mother. And there was so much resentment there, at the same time, I longed for her acceptance. I wanted my mother to pick us over, whatever current boyfriend she had at the time. But at the same time, I had so much resentment towards her. But I felt this blind sense of loyalty to her because she brought me into this world.
Keith, I don't mean to cut.
No coping skills.
Keith, one.
That's okay. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to make this point. I do family law, as you know, and I also do criminal defense, as you know, and I always tell to my clients and to parents, and I'm sure I've said this to Marge, there's an inherent bond between a child and a parent, and no matter how much abuse she may have put you through, or what you witnessed, or what you resented her for, you always long for her love, and that is just inherent. It's genetically, it's psychologically, and we see it all the time, especially in family court, because I often have parents, who are alienated or who say things that you're like, how could this kid live with this mom after she said all these things? But the kid you cannot stop a parent from loving a kid. For example, I have a case where the kid was very similar to Keith, beaten, and I'm trying to use the words lightly, and she still wants to go back to her mother because there's an inherent bond that almost can never be broken. So I understand what you're saying, Keith. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Thank you. So, I did try to reunite with her, and like I said, it's just that resentment was there, and we just clashed. But I always felt this need to be loved and accepted by my mother, like more so than even my biological father. That even though I had little to do with him throughout my life at the time, I didn't really have a relationship with him. But I didn't seek that as much as I did with my mother. No matter how much harm she put me in harm's way, it's like you said, I felt like I needed that from my mother because, of course, she brought me into this world. So I ended up going back to the youth authority once again for another petty crime. And then at the age of 18, I was considered to be so mature at the age of 18 that the youth authority had resentenced me back to state prison as an adult at 18 years old. So I came into the California Department of Corrections at the age of 18, already having what that pre-exposure to, early incarceration. So at the time, they considered us what they call CYA babies, which is California Youth Authority babies. So we were like right for the picking for the gang subculture when we came in here because we had already been groomed in that environment as teens. So right away, when I came into the system at that age, I gravitated towards the people that I knew would accept me without questioning my background, or questioning my trauma, my hurt. I just needed to buy into what they were selling, and at the time, for that acceptance, we're willing to throw to the wayside any kind of moral values that we may have, like just for the sake of acceptance. And again, so that gang subculture became my lifestyle. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. My mother's Mexican, my father's white, so I look more, as opposed to, contrary to what my brother looks like, more like my mother, I look more like my father, so I look white. So right away, you get in where you fit in. So right away, I was accepted amongst the whites, and I was pretty much told, like, hey, you're right, you're going to hang with us, and this is it. I didn't grow up like that. I didn't grow up in those racial boundaries with people. I had black friends, Mexican, Asian, like. However, within this environment, it's just like that net of safety, that identity that I became involved with. Um, so the gang subculture in here was something that I gravitated towards and stayed with within walls. But once I got out into the community, I was reunited with all the people that I grew up with. So it was like living a double life. Like, even though I had ties to the prison gangs in prison, I knew I had to do things out in the community as far as committing crimes to benefit the gang faction. I also had another life that had nothing to do with that, which was people that I grew up with. And so it was kind of like living a double life. In 1994, I had pulled from I had gotten out from doing a violation, and my mother had called me one night. Matter of fact, I was living in town. I was working as a roofer. And I did not, I had contact with my mother, but I did not live with her. She lived out at the ranch home with her then boyfriend, who I had met before on numerous occasions and even stayed out there for a few weeks at a time at their ranch. He was an alcoholic, very abusive mentally, emotionally, and I guess he used to put her hands on him or put his hands on her when I wasn't around. My brother lived in town with his wife and kids. So when she called me that night, I had just gotten off work and I was laying in bed watching a movie, and she called me from the payphone crying hysterically and told me that her boyfriend had came home drunk from the bar again and made her perform oral sex on him before slapping her around and then passing out in the bedroom. Apparently they had split up a couple months before, and they were just living in the same house but sharing bedrooms, so they weren't intimate with one another, from what she said. When she told me that, of course I got angry. But right away I was like, man, why don't you leave? Why don't you just pack your stuff and leave? You keep getting in these situations with these men, but you keep staying. And but again, I also felt that need to protect my mother. So right away, she started telling me, like, hey, I need you to do something to him before he ends up killing me. And I already knew. Something told me I knew what my mother wanted. I knew that she wanted me to do something to him. Whether it has 60 seconds remaining. So she had told me that I'll be there in the next 20 to 30 minutes to pick you up. I don't want you to bring your girlfriend with you. I want you to come out here by yourself. So, I hung up the phone, and later on, my girlfriend at the time and her mom said, even though they didn't know what was going on at the time, she said, your face just turned white as a ghost, like you just shut off completely. So I got dressed. I stood out in front of the house, and 20, 30 minutes later, my mother pulled up in her truck and picked me up. And my girlfriend at the time refused to let me go by myself and said that she was going to go no matter what was going to happen. So we got in the truck. My mother drove us out there to the ranch, and
Right?
Well, I was going to say this, but I don't want to cut him off, but this, Marge, I'm sure, but it takes the average woman 7 times to leave a domestic violence situation. 7 times. And we see it all the time back in family court. Like, you get a protection from abuse order, restraining order, depending on where you live. And then 5 minutes later, they're calling me back saying, I dropped it. And they go back and then repeat, recycle. And it takes the average woman or men, not just women, 7 times to leave their abuser. And some of them don't make it out.
But what he did to these kids, and what Keith went through, like the beating he took to put him in the hospital. Like, I've heard this story several times, and every time I hear it, it just kills me to hear this story. It really does. Thank you for using Global Link. Here we go. Hey, Keith.
Yeah. So we drove back out to the ranch. My mother left me out by the main road and told me that as soon as she flicked the lights off, on and off in her stolen bedroom. That meant that I could start walking up towards the house down this long dirt driveway that they had. And I did. I tried to get my girlfriend at the time to stay out by the road, but she wouldn't. She wanted to follow me all the way up to the house. We got up to the house, and the front door was open. My mother was at the door. The lights were out. I walked up into the house, and first my mom was trying to hand me a kitchen knife. She said she wanted me to go in there and take his life with the kitchen knife, and I told her I can't do it like that. And then she tried to hand me a baseball bat, and I told her I didn't want to use the baseball bat. And I asked her if there was one of his guns in the house, and she went and got one of his guns. And then we walked into the house, and we were standing in the hallway, and she took the gun out of the zipper case and put the gun in my hand. And she stepped into the bathroom, and before she did, she turned me around towards the bedroom door. And I went in there, and the light was already dim, so I could see him as he was passed out laid in his bed. And I aimed it at him, and I shot. And keep in mind, I very rarely even shot a real gun outside of just a BB gun my whole life. So I try to get as close as possible, and I pulled the trigger, and I ran out of the bedroom, and I ran through the hallway and out the front door into the front yard and started vomiting in the front yard. And she came out of the bathroom when I was walking back into the house.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
She asked me if he was dead, and I was crying, and she was crying. And then I said, yeah, and she told me to make sure and told me to go back in there and shoot him again. And I went in there and I shot him again. And I came out, and she took the gun. And then I ran back out to the front yard, and my girlfriend was standing outside by the front yard by one of the big trees in front of the house, and asked me if those were gunshots, and I said yes. And we both got in the truck, and then we drove off, and we devised the plan that my mother was just going to say that she came home and found him dead in his room, like it was a break-in. Like a break-in gone wrong or something. And 2 weeks later, I had already talked to the investigators a couple times after that, and I'm sure they already figured something was going on. But 2 weeks later, we were both arrested and charged with the murder of her boyfriend. And right away, we separated our trials. And her defense was battered woman syndrome, and I admitted to being the trigger man. Initially, during the interrogation, she was trying to take the rap for it, and so was I. So we both were saying that we were the shooters, and then eventually, whenever it went to trial, I took the stand in her trial, which was before mine, and told them that I was the shooter. And she had a hung jury the first time, and then the second time, they found her guilty and gave her a life sentence. But, during my trial, like, none of my childhood stuff was admissible. Like, none of it was relevant to the case. Like no matter what, I had a public defender at the time, and like, none of that mattered. Like, they just painted this picture of somebody that had already been in and out of the juvenile system, in the adult system, and being a gang member. And I had gang tattoos that they highlighted and wrote about it in the newspapers, and so right away I was painted this picture of being just a monster, and I didn't tell nobody for a lot of years, but afterwards, like, the whole time, as I was standing in that bedroom and I was aiming that gun at Ronald Pruitt, which was her boyfriend at the time that I killed, like, I didn't even see that it was him. Like, in my head, I visualized that this was the stepfather that that molested me, that almost killed me, that used to beat on my mom, that used to beat on us. So that I was afraid for him to come home every day after work. Like, I didn't even see Ron as being Ron Pruitt. Like to me, he was that monster that tormented me as a kid. And
Keith, did your mom testify in your trial?
No, she did not.
That's interesting from a legal perspective. That's very interesting.
Yeah. You have to realize with my mother, she never, even the times that I attempted to write her while we were in the jail or even in prison all those years for 20 years afterwards, not one time did she respond to one of my letters, even when I got correspondence approval. Like, she used to always tell my brother, it's not good for the case, it's not good for the case. And I kept writing, and I never got a response, and it just made me feel even like, kind of like the sacrificial lamb, like, it's even that much more significant. And it took me a lot of years to accept the fact that, that I had a choice that night to make. And even though, I had convinced myself for a lot of years that I was protecting my mother, and she used me, so, and she did acknowledge, even when she got out, she was eventually found suitable for parole in here in 2000, and I want to say 2015 or 16. And when she was found suitable, I had called my brother, and he had told me I was in another prison. And he told me, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, right. Like, what do you mean the board found her suitable to go home? I felt like here I was being left behind again, But unfortunately for me, I was also sentenced under the California 3 strikes law because I had two prior burglaries at the age of 18 on my first adult case from YA. So those two felony residential burglaries, they used those to strike me out. And then over the years while in prison, I had caught in other cases like assault with weapons, possession of weapons, and every single time that I accumulated another case or committed another crime within prison, they used those same two burglaries to strike me out an additional 4 more cases. So, I ended up with a total of 5 consecutive life terms under the California 3 strikes law. So,
yeah, so
of the murder.
Keith, a lot of people don't know the 3 strikes law that are listening probably. And what that means, guys, is when you have 2 prior felonies and you get a third, it's a mandatory life sentence. So why Keith is saying he got 5 is because of his previous records. It's not that he unalived, I'm using TikTok words, unalived 5 people. It's just that because of his prior record, that's why he got sentenced the way he got sentenced. We don't have that in Pennsylvania where I'm from, but it is a mandatory life sentence for unaliving someone.
Right.
Yeah, and even now today that they have addressed releasing 3 strikers, like they're not as, it was put into place because back at the time there was a case that occurred in Petaluma County over here in California where a career criminal had gotten out, had kidnapped a young girl, raped her, and killed her, and they were tough on crime. Like, and this is what these crimes were put in place for, and they started to abuse the 3 strikes law by convicting guys for, burglary, petty theft, but just having those additional felony priors. And then, until recently in the last few years, they started addressing it. But for guys like me that were sentenced under that old 3 strikes law, and then being like, even though my residential burglaries are nonviolent, they're still considered serious felonies in California, just because of the chance that somebody could have been occupying the home, could have been. So it doesn't matter what crime that I caught in prison, they use those same 2 burglaries because they were already deemed by a judge as being strikeable felonies. So it was easy for them to go on record and say, okay, well, they were already considered strikeable, so we're going to use these. So they used them 5 different times.
So
when
Keith,
my mother did get out,
go ahead.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to tell them what your sentence was. I know it, but so the podcast knows.
So your sentence.
So my total, so the 5 consecutive life terms total 284 years to life. 284 years to life. So that sentence not only deprives me of going in front of a parole board for any kind of consultation hearing, as opposed to somebody that has a life without the possibility of parole, they're even eligible for a board hearing, like kind of like an assessment. And it also deprives me of not only being, even though all my crimes were committed under the age of 25, which, biologically, that's, it's proven that the brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25, 26 years of age. That law, because I was sentenced the way that I was, it excludes me from being a youth offender because of those 2 burglary priors at the age of 18. Disqualifies me from ever having a Franklin hearing, so nothing from my childhood is inadmissible. So it shows no relevance from my childhood to be considered into my adulthood by the board panel.
Okay, so your mom, I think you were in the middle of saying this when I asked you this, but your mom is out of prison as of now.
Yeah, she got out, and she still never, like, I only talked to her. The first time I talked to her was maybe a year after she was out, and I just happened to call my brother's house on Easter Sunday, and I was in another prison down south in Southern California, and she just jumped on the phone, and I talked to her for just a couple minutes, and I felt kind of caught off guard. And I'll be honest with you, I had been in my recovery of start doing all the internal work on myself, and I thought, I didn't think it would affect me the way that it did, but for the next few weeks, I struggled very, very, very much, and I went into a deep depression. Long story short, I sought out mental health, sought out the clinician. They put me on a crisis bed, got me out of the prison, transferred me to another prison for mental health assessment for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then I started talking to a clinician about, everything from my childhood. I started really addressing that, and I didn't think it was going to hit me the way that it did. And from there,
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Where I'm at now, and I think I had talked to her again at the same time when she was at my brother's house when I had called. My brother still has a relationship with her, and he respects the boundaries of not just putting her on the phone and getting on the phone and talking to me. I always try not to say anything in derogation of their relationship. So I tried to leave that up to my brother, but at the same time, for a lot of years, I didn't know how to set the boundaries with him. Tell him, hey, I can't have a relationship with her. I can't even talk to her because it's not healthy for me. For a lot of years, I struggled with, I wanted answers. I had expectations. I wanted her to tell me she was sorry, that she loved me, that what she did was wrong. For her to call me that night and drive me out there and put the gun in my hand and her own child, and she would have never done that for my brother, but she did that to me. I wanted her to own up to that, and I had these expectations. And I never got that from her. The more that I wanted it and set myself up to expect that, it just hurt me more and more and more. And finally, I had to draw that boundary and say, look, this is.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I can't talk to her. I cannot have her in my life. Unfortunately, this is the mother that brought me into this world, but this is not my mother. And today I'm okay with that, but it's taken me a lot of years to get there. Because, for a lot of years, I wasn't thinking about myself. I still felt guilty that, even talking bad about her or even saying out loud to people that what she did, what she asked me to do was wrong. But today I can very much say that what she did was wrong. What she did since I was a child was wrong by continuing to go back to this man that was harming her and myself and my brother, until he almost took my life.
Yeah, I mean,
it just ended.
Hang up. Yeah, it's crazy, Marge. It's I want to say to him, and I don't want to cut him off because obviously his story is so important, but what I'm gonna just say this, and I don't care if he hears it later, but what kind
Yeah,
of
no.
mom are you? Like what?
Right.
Like
Right.
I'm sorry, but like
Who
not only
does
do
that?
you let your kid get beat and abused, but then you basically set him up to kill somebody. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, who
that's
does that?
yeah. I mean, and I know the listeners haven't heard yet. They're gonna in a few moments, but thank God he has enough self-worth and a self-understanding to be the person he is today because, again, people don't know yet, but when they hear, I'm assuming they're going to hear, be
Yeah.
shocked as to all the things that he does now because,
Yeah.
he was dealt a shitty hand of cards. He was.
He
I
was.
mean,
He was.
and,
From 3 years old. From 3 years old.
and
And
also,
he never admitted that he was sexually assaulted till he was on my platform. He
no, I did
never
not.
admitted. He admitted it on my platform, and he said it. Marge, I finally opened up to you and to your platform. Like, he couldn't admit it until he came on my platform.
Wow.
I couldn't believe he did it on. Like, I was floored. I was floored. He did that. Yeah. I mean, he cried.
Sure. Of course.
It broke me for a long time because, and I can't believe I can feel the way I do about somebody I never met. Like, we're so close, and he means so much to me. He really does. Ugh. Here he is.
Okay, Keith. So you get, a quite a hefty sentence there, to say the least. You get, I can't even remember how many days, but to 5 years or 5 life sentences, and you go to prison. I'm assuming, but the more important thing is, and the more amazing things you have done. Me and Marge have touched base about it on the last episode, but we want you to tell us all of the things that you have done since you've been in prison and sort of how you started doing what the awesome stuff you're doing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I want to say between the years of 2008 and 2012, after having stepped away from the gangs, getting caught up in the federal RICO indictments and then federal witness against the gang that I was involved with, I still kind of bounced around the prison system on these, they call them S&Y yards. They're basically yards where there's specifically houses, gang dropouts. But the same prison mentality stuff still goes on. The drugs, the drinking, the criminal mentality. It's the same negative atmosphere as it was before. But I went back to the SHU in 2008 all the way from 2012 for violence on another inmate. And when I went full circle back there, I sat there in the SHU, which is segregated housing unit, where you're basically in the cell 24 hours a day. And I'd already done 13 years in the segregated housing unit, when I first came back to prison after the case with my mother. So I started to sit back there, and I started to feel like I went full circle, and I started, like, my change didn't just happen sudden. Like, it was a series of sitting back and reflecting on my life. Like, I think I had to reach that lowest point spiritually and mentally, where I wanted to either give up and die in here, or I wanted to fight, because I didn't want to. I didn't want to hurt no more. Like, I spent so much of my life hurting inside, and I knew that that's what was causing me to hurt other people. Whether it was people I didn't know, whether it was people that loved me, cared about me, that sat on the sidelines watching me suffer, watching me, give up. I think I finally wanted to at least try. I had no identity anymore, other than, serving the rest of my life in prison with all these laws that are changing. I never anticipated ever getting out of prison. But I just wanted to stop. I wanted to stop hurting. And in 2012, 2013, I was sitting on I got released out of the SHU. I was sitting on a yard where there was a high level of violence. I ended up getting a job in the education area as a teacher's clerk, and I had pretty good writing skills. I spent a lot of time in the SHU writing and drawing, among other stuff. So I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed self-expression. So it put me in charge of the creative writing section in the class, and I started helping other inmates, writing, getting ready for GED prep, in the language arts section. So it took me just that one old man to believe in me and give me a chance. And I remember as uncomfortable it was, I remember standing up in front of that classroom and communicating with people and showing them how to write. And I felt like it, as awkward as it was in the first few days, it becomes something that I was really, really comfortable with. I was comfortable talking and sharing and being vulnerable, even though I'm in this environment. Then I started getting involved in college. I enrolled in my first college class, and I think I took 2 classes one semester, and I got A's. Here I was self-doubting myself in the beginning, thinking, man, I'm not cut out for this college stuff. I don't even know if I could do this, but I remember getting those A's and being proud of myself, and unfortunately, not even having nobody to share that happiness with, but just being proud that I could do it. And then I got involved in the self-help groups, and one thing I discovered about those self-help groups was every time that I sat in that room, no matter who was sitting in that room with me, I felt compelled to share my story and what happened to me, because I started to understand that people around me have suffered in the same ways. And I felt like I've always had this leadership quality about myself. I was always the person to self-sacrifice myself, the person that would, step on the front lines for people. And it took me a few years to start understanding how powerful that can be when you do for the right thing. So when I'm sitting in these groups and I'm sharing my stories, I see these people, these other guys, these other men, even though they're quieter and they're not sharing, I could tell that it's resonating with them. And then after class, when they come up to you and you've never even talked to them before on the yard, and they said, hey, man, I think that was pretty good. That was pretty powerful. Thank you for sharing. I started to understand that the reason why was because it helped comfort them as well, too, because they had probably experienced the same level of trauma, if not worse than what I had.
And
the more that I was able to heal. Yeah.
so what do you do? I know you do a lot. So what do you do now in the prisons? I know you run the Wiley's Wishes program. Me and Marge have talked about that a lot, and I know you do other programs. So we have 18 minutes left. So I just want to make sure that we get to what you're doing now.
So right now I'm in charge. I'm the prison liaison of the Wiley's Wish Animal Rescue Dog Program here at the prison that I'm at. It's the second one that I've been involved with, where I've become not only the liaison, but the coordinator / newsletter editor, lead trainer, lead mentor. I've been involved with these programs for the past 6 years, training dogs. We rescue sheltered, homeless, displaced dogs from the community. Some of them come in here with trauma. We train them, we counter condition whatever issues they may have. We make them adoptable and find them forever homes out in the community. I do other mentoring in here. I mentor youth offender community work, where they bring in juvenile at-risk youth into the prison, where we sit down and mentor them and share a personal story.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Deter them from following the same negative paths that we've taken in the past. I've been involved with so many different things. I'm the facilitator now of CGA, which is Criminal Gangs Anonymous. I've been facilitators of so many other groups over the years that eventually I had to step back and allow other people to do them, because it's become too overwhelmed with all the other stuff. I've written and finished 3 books just in the past year. I have one that's sitting on Amazon right now, waiting to go live after I do the final reading of my copy. The book's title is Trauma Unraveled. It's a collaboration of 19 different stories from some of the men here on the yard that I've mentored.
So, Keith, we're gonna link the Amazon link. I'm assuming it's on Amazon to all three of your books under the YouTube podcast, so everyone can buy them for you. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Keith, I think people think like, and this is true in some prisons, particularly like our county prisons, but they think like when you're in prison, you're like locked in a 2x4 cell for like, 23 hours a day, and you come out 1 hour a day to shower and, call your wife or your mom or something like that. But it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you is you barely spend any time in your cell unless you want to, because you're mentoring, you're doing the dog program. Is this because you're a trusted inmate, or is this because this is just how this prison works? Can you tell us how you get to like your status, if you will?
Well, this prison particularly is the level 3. In California, they have a level 4, 3, 2, and 1. I've spent a lot of years on level 4s where it's a lot of time in the cell. The only time to get out is if you have a job that a priority job that gets you out. Being here on a level 3, it's not that I'm trusted more, but I do have a responsibility that's let's just say a lot more because of the dog program and mentoring the guys. So it's a hands-on job that I need to do. I need to be available for, and it's I took the opportunity. It's not like I'm forced to do this job because it's a voluntary job. I don't even get paid for what I do. I just left work with the dogs and the men. But you build that rapport. Like, there's still stuff that goes on here on this yard every day. I was telling Mark earlier today that yesterday they had 3 incidents within a matter of a few hours, serious incidents on the yard, so they locked us up for the whole day until today, and then they had another incident this morning. So it still happens around us, but at the same time, in my position, I've had to maneuver and build that rapport with the staff where they know, okay, well, I know this guy's moving it. He's going over here today. He's going over here. I'm not worried about him. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. So you kind of build that rapport with them where they just let you be because they know that you're walking the walk and you're walking with integrity, and you're not going to do nothing to jeopardize yourself for the program that you're involved with or the men. So, but it does. And keep in mind, I've spent 32 years in prison just on this term, and that's not counting the few years that I did before that. So I've navigated this system for a long time, but it's also taken me a long time to flip the coin where I'm not seen as the old term where they say your reputation precedes you. Unfortunately, I did have a past reputation, but since I came, to this side of, transformation of my life, like I've had to build that with you. Guys are still given a choice in here. They can spend all day in the cell or all day outside doing nothing but getting in trouble. But you also have the choice to take control back of your life and start fixing yourself. And that's what I do in here,
And Keith, I don't know how much you can say about this, but is your current legal status that you are going to continue being in prison for quite some time, or are you hoping for something else? And again, please don't say anything that would be used against you or could harm you.
Oh, no, there's nothing. Like the only thing that I have going for me right now is the appeal on my resentencing, which just took place in Stanislaus County 5-6 months ago. But the only other action that I have, foreseeable action I have, is there's something going on right now with liferage on indeterminate sentences that have already put 25 years in. Like there's some laws happening right now where we're supposed to be eligible to go before a board. So if that does not happen, I won't see a board until my elderly parole is 60 years old, and I'm only 54 right now. Again, because of the 3 strikes law, I'm excluded from elderly parole at 50. Like a lot of guys are.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
For elderly parole at 50, but again, because I was sentenced under the 3 strikes law, I don't go until I'm 60. So again, that's the hindrance of that law has got me there too.
And just so people know that are listening, just because you go in front of a board, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, but it's up to them to determine if you're paroled. It's not an automatic pass, if you will.
No, it's not. Without a doubt, there's times that go in front of a board and get denials, 3-year denials, 5-year denials. And some guys end up having to go to board 3 or 4 times before they get out. My thing is to live it each day as if I was going to board tomorrow. That's been my mindset for a lot of years, was just continue to do the work, because as if I'm going to go home, in front of a board tomorrow, because I don't want that time to come and me being, them saying, well, what'd you do all these years? I don't want that to be the carrot on the stick at the end for me. I didn't make these changes in my life just for the sake of only going home. I wanted that, again, I wanted to stop hurting inside. I wanted to start finding my humanity again.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I wanted to start finding peace inside of prison. I tell people all the time, you got to get prison out of you before you ever get out of prison. And that's what I started to do, and I feel like I've succeeded in that in so many ways. Regardless of whether I go home tomorrow or 2 years from now or 3 years from now.
Yeah, and of course, you long of that day, and I assume you dream of that day, every day. But while you're inside the prison, which I know there's regulations, and you got locked up, like, for example, yesterday because of some incident that probably had nothing to do with you or involve you. But unfortunately, like, for the listeners that don't know much about prison, when there is an incident or there's a safety concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keith or Marge, but everybody is punished, if you will. You're all locked in and you all can't go anywhere, and they have to do whatever they have to do until they clear it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
He has to call back.
Okay.
But when there's a lockdown, yeah, they all get locked
all,
down till it's cleared. Yep, everybody gets locked down.
and
Absolutely.
they can't call or anything, right?
Nope.
Yep.
Yep.
So they're all stuck in.
So there's times when there's a lockdown. If we have a show planned, we have to wait until it's lifted. Yeah.
And I'm on TikTok live at the same time, but Marge, I just want to tell everyone on the TikTok that you're having a show tonight at 8:30, right?
8:30, yes.
With Keith. Is he going to be on?
Yeah, actually, I have 3 inmates calling tonight. We have 3 of them calling. Yeah, I have all 3 phones going tonight, but yeah, we will do that. And some other lifers that are out, they were released, and they're going to be joining me in the boxes tonight.
Perfect.
We're talking about gangs and crimes in prison. Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go.
What was I saying now? So Keith, I know you wrote your 3 books. Marge held up 2 of them. I know you can't see her, and she did tell me before we started the show that you have another one coming out. So we're going to be happy to link those below my podcast so everyone can know where to find them. And then your friends and family will be able to listen to all of this on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube. Marge will send, I know she's in contact with your wife, and she will be able to send those out. So I don't know, what I would like to know from you, Keith, and you're feel free to share anything you want. But I guess I've been inside the prison, not as an inmate, obviously, but seeing clients, I've been locked in just as you have, because there's been an emergency where, I've been seeing a client and they tell me you can't leave, you have to stay in this room and wait till we clear you and all of those other things. But I'm assuming that excuse my language, but that you've seen some pretty fucked up shit in there, and you have experienced some stuff where you're either confronted or happen to be next to somebody that causes, it's not, I don't know how to put this PC, but, in the everyday world, you have a lot more freedom to move out of the way or ignore somebody or don't pick up the phone call. But in prison, you're sort of confined to an area and you can't freely move, or maybe you can't freely get a guard. So can you share some of your experiences about what's the most difficult thing about trying to manage that, or what you do in those situations? I know you're very highly respected and you probably don't have many of these situations, but I'm assuming there was a time, 32 years ago where these situations confronted themselves.
Right, yeah. Just because I don't talk about the ugly stuff, even in a lot of my writing in my books, I've been involved in stabbings. I've been involved in 9 separate stabbings in prison over the years. I've been involved in prison riots. I've been involved with assaults with correctional officers. And I think that's the hardest thing for me is in this change of, developing the remorse that I have and now having to navigate that is because, I was part of that problem. Now I'm not, so I see what needs to be the solution because we need to be the solution, those of us that have been a part of the problem, because we got to flip it inside out. Um, that stuff still happens around out here. So I have to be more aware of what's going on around me. I have to be more aware of reading the yard, reading the tone of the yard. People are grouped up over here. People are grouped up over here. People are using drugs over here. This guy sells drugs. This guy sells drugs. This guy can't live in my cell with me because he's a drug user and he's caught up in the criminal mindset because it can still affect me. I still have to be more cautious of that. And, it's sad because in the sense of change that I have now in this new life is, when I see that now, when I'm trying to do so many good things and positive things, like with this dog program.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
It's not just me now that I have to look out for. I have to look out for 13 to 15 dogs at a time. I have to look out for 20 guys in the program that could be misdirected by somebody outside the program. Like, there's guys that are still overdosing in the building and just cells down the way from me. So I see them going out on a stretcher, and it's having to take that proactive stance and educate these people and be there for them. Where, the way that I used to survive in here was just staying to myself and just watching my own P's and Q's now. But now I have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to use my ability to connect with people in a way that's going to try to influence these people in a positive way. It doesn't mean bad things are still not happening, because most days you feel like you're playing tug of war with the devil because you're trying to do good stuff and all this bad stuff is happening around you. So at the same time, it's trying to keep that calmness, that peace of mind where you don't feel like you're doing it all for nothing, because that stuff still has happened. Like, I haven't had an incident. I haven't had a write-up for any kind of rule infraction in 15 or almost 16 years. I still get, there's times where I still get mad. I still get upset, but I don't exert those same behaviors. And when I see other guys doing that, I try to tell myself, hey, Keith, you were there before. If anything, you can empathize with this person. You can empathize with what's going on in the yard because you've been there. So I still have to navigate because that stuff still goes on in prison.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, we see it, out on a county level. I see it all the time when I'm in there, right? Just to simply have a legal visit. And I think, the other thing I want to ask you before we wrap up here is, I know Marge, and you co-host the show, Charged with Change, and many other versions of that. And she has often told me, and she told us on the last podcast, that sort of you bring the inmates to her, or the I don't even want to say inmates, the people to her, to interview and share their story. And I'm just wondering, Keith, it's sort of like how I pick my clients or they pick me, but is it do you approach them? Do they approach you? Do you say, hey, look, and I think I could really resonate with this guy and, make him see a different perspective? Or do they come to you and say, hey, Keith, I want to be more like you, or a little bit of both? How does that happen?
It's the last thing that you said. I want to say it's a little bit of both. Of course, I always maintain the integrity of anything that I'm working on, especially when it involves people out in the community, because I know the significance of every relationship is there's investments. However many investments you make into that relationship and that trust and that bond with somebody, it's the same way in here with these guys. Like,
Sure.
These guys that I'm in a group with, that I'm mentoring with, that's approached me and asked me to be their sponsor, an NA or an AA, or, somebody that just wants to learn from me, or like sometimes I'll approach them and I'll say, hey, I think, you should really share your story. Like, I show them examples of my book. I show them some of my writings, my portfolios of all the stuff that I do. And I try to allow them to see the value in their own story and the willingness to share it. And I never put pressure on them. And then, you start developing that capital with people in here, the relationships that you invested with. And that transcends out into the community because I've gotten guys that have gotten out of prison that, still stay in touch with me. And Marge will tell you, and they always tell her, like, Keith's the reason why I got out of prison. He took time to invest in me. For me, those are investments that don't just stop once they get out of prison because they go out into the community, they're helping other people. So it's more like paying it forward. But I think you develop that credibility because people know that you're not full of crap because you're not just selling them a way to get out of prison and you're not living that lifestyle yourself in here. So,
sure.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's sort of, how it is with my clients too. It's, and sort of why I do some of the stuff I do, and Marge does too, because, it's not all about, it's about who you are as a person and how you resonate with somebody. And if you can make a positive difference in their life, obviously, Keith, you are doing that inside the prison. Not, once did you do, 30 something years ago, that wasn't the story. But listen, people can change. And me and Marge did a whole episode last week. It's now published, basically about, and her whole platform is about how you can be, sent to prison and changed. And I think, I always live by the motto, people deserve second chances and third chances and fourth chances. And, we tried explaining on the podcast prior that just because, you're charged with murder, first degree murder, you're convicted of it. It's not a situation where we were comparing your story to Brian Kohlberger and how widely different they are. And, when people hear the word murder, they automatically think it's Brian Kohlberger's situation. They don't think about, Keith's situation where there could be abuse or, a mother handing the gun and saying, do it, right? They think of a cold-blooded person that has no feelings, no heart, no emotion, no youngness, no background, no environmental struggles. And that's, sort of why I attempt to, I don't want to use the word expose, but let the public know that just because you're in prison or you're charged with a crime doesn't mean you're a shithole. And I wouldn't ever say that about you, Keith, but there's also people in prison that are, wrongfully accused or overcharged or over sentenced or all of those things. And people just hear that you were in prison, they assume a negative connotation. And it really bothers me because I know people professionally and personally that have been in prison. And I will tell you that probably 90% of them are not pieces of crap. It just bothers me. So I really thank you, Keith, for sharing all your story in great detail today. I mean, that was extreme detail. And for, showing the world that you are living proof about what you can do in prison, how you can change and your mindset can change. And I want to thank you personally for all the good that you do for yourself and for the inmates and for the world by writing your books. I'm honored to call you one of my friends, as is Marge. I know she considers you family. And I really thank you for coming on today.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to share my story with you tonight. And like I said, just being able to show the community that, granted who I was, or who I thought I was at the age of 22 when I committed my crime. One thing about my sentence and my time in prison is, it was necessary at the time, but today, considering, my growth, like, when does justice become an injustice? And I feel like with not just my case, my situation, is there's a lot of us in here that, it's just an injustice now. It's a waste of time to keep us incarcerated especially when we have so much more to offer the world still, obviously. And I try not to let these walls take that away from me, no matter how long I've been in here. So I really appreciate you having me tonight.
You're welcome, Keith. And I think we'll talk to Marge off the show, but we'll have maybe one of your mentees or somebody you recommend. We can have them on the show relatively soon. Or if Keith, you want to come back on with one of your guys, I'm happy to accommodate that, or your wife or whoever. I would be happy to have you on again, or anybody that you wish. Same with you, Marge. So thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, Keith. I'll talk to you in a little bit. I'll see you in a little while.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Keith.
Good night.
Good night. All right.
Thank you, Marge. I appreciate you having him on the phone.
Oh, no problem at all. I appreciate you.
What a sad story. What
I
a
know.
sad,
I know.
sad story. It's just, and
I'm
I just
telling you.
think like, if his mom wouldn't have called him, or if, he
Yep.
wouldn't have got out of bed, or if he was at
Yep.
work, or if he was sleeping even, like, he wouldn't have
Yep.
picked up the phone, like, he would never be where he is today. And I don't know,
Yep.
did, like, I'm a firm believer in, like, did this happen for a reason, in the sense that, look at what he's doing for the inside. Like, did the higher universe or whatever you believe in, I don't want to get into that, but did
Right. No, I
did,
know.
did is that his calling in life? Like, it's just because he's done such amazing stuff in there, but
He
it's just
has.
like, I could never be him. I know myself. I'm sure you're the
No.
same as me. Like, I
No.
I could never do it. I could never do it.
No. No. And
Um,
he's just an amazing person, and he's so caring, and he's always looking out for everyone around him. I met so many people through him, and he helps everyone. He really does. He helps all the guys around him. And I heard this story a dozen times, and I keep, every time I hear it, it just, ugh. Like I said, he was at work. He was at work. Why wasn't he sleeping, like you said?
Yeah. It's just like that
Mm.
one phone call changed his life. And so many times I hear, like, when I talk to my clients, and
Mhm.
they'll say, if I didn't just do this, if I just listened to my mom or my sister, or if I was asleep, or if I was called into work, or if I
Right.
didn't stay late, or, all of these one little minor details can
Yeah.
literally flip your life upside down forever.
All the what ifs. What
Yep.
if? Yep. Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
okay, thanks again, Marge. I really appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thank
We
you.
will link all of your stuff below again. Uh,
Okay.
and I will be on your show at 8:30. As soon as I put my little kid to bed, I will be on.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.